21 people were massacred at my favorite restaurant in Kabul, Afghanistan. And all I could think about was chocolate cake. It was in that moment that changed the way that I thought about humanity and food. Now, I first arrived in Kabul in 2006 to work with the local Afghan disability organization. Now, I had worked in international development for the past 20 years all over the world, focusing mainly on disability programs for people with disabilities as a technical advisor. And while I'd worked all over the world, Afghanistan was the first war zone that I'd ever worked in. While it was a challenge working with security restrictions and limited movement and suicide bombers and attacks, Afghanistan got under my skin in a good way, and I would work there for 6 years. I remember the first time that I ate at the taverna. It was about a month after I arrived in country, and after walking past the 2 guards and through the metal doors, I was greeted by Kamal, the Lebanese owner. Now, Kamal was about average height. He had salt and pepper hair and a thin, trim little mustache. His rimless glasses disappeared into his face when he laughed or smiled, which was often. I ordered a falafel sandwich and French fries, which quickly became my favorite meal, and I would eat at the taverna at least a couple of times a week. But my favorite part of the meal was at the end of every meal at Kamal's restaurant, we received a free slice of chocolate cake. Now, this chocolate cake was the best chocolate cake in Kabul, and I am not kidding, it was amazing. And it reminded me of Betty Crocker. You know what I'm talking about? It was really, really moist. It has that gooey chocolate frosting on the top that sticks to your fork when you dig into it. Despite living in a challenging environment, eating that slice of chocolate cake was like eating a little slice of love. And then terrorism hit the dining room. A suicide bomber detonated his vest in front of the restaurant while 2 others stormed the restaurant and killed all 21 diners in the restaurant, including Kamal. He died defending the restaurant and the patrons that he loved so much. I returned to the taverna a couple of days after the attack to lay flowers. And as I stood in front of the building, thinking about all of the meals that I'd had there, the going away dinner that I had, the business lunches, and Kamal and those Afghans and expatriates who were senselessly murdered, I was grieving. And I was heartbroken because no longer was sharing a meal with strangers an innocent thing. It was now tainted by blood and hatred. In the last 3 years that I lived in Kabul, I planted a garden behind the high walls and razor wire of my compound. Now, I planted this garden for purely selfish reasons. I wanted my collard greens. I figured if I was going to live in a war zone, girl was going to have her greens. So with what my guards Ali and Halik like to call foreigner seeds, I planted, in addition to the collards, Swiss chard, kale, mustard greens, a bunch of different lettuces, and a whole variety of herbs. No, I'd never planted a garden before. I always killed every plant I ever had, including cactus. So I planted everything at once. Now, I don't know what was in that soil in my compound, but everything came up all at once. So here I am with all of this produce, not quite sure what to do with it. So I gave some to Afghan colleagues and some to expatriates. I also started cooking for friends. That evolved into monthly get-togethers for expatriates. These gatherings were an opportunity for us to be able to be more than just our jobs. It was an opportunity for us to relax in this stressful environment, to tell stories, to laugh, and to share a great meal. It was then that I saw the power of food in bringing people together. Eating in the homes of people like Ali and Durrani gave me an opportunity to learn about the people and the country through food. Afghanistan became less about the war, the security rules, and suicide bombers, but it became more about the personal relationships that I would develop eating in Afghans' homes. And it didn't matter that I was a Black American woman, and it didn't matter that they were Afghan and Muslim. We were just human beings sharing a meal. I left Afghanistan about 8 months after the Taverna attack, and 2 years later, I moved to Charleston to become closer to family. About a month after that, I attended an event at the Gilliard Center commemorating the 1-year anniversary of the Mother Emanuel massacre. One of the speakers at that event was Bernice King, the daughter of slain civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. And she issued a challenge to the Charleston community. She challenged Charleston to fight hate by finding ways to love and understand each other despite all sorts of would-be dividing factors. She said, "Go to each other's homes, have dinner," and it clicked. The minute I heard that, I thought back to the gatherings that I'd had in Kabul in my compound. I thought back to those meals that I had with Afghans like Ali and Durrani. And I also thought about Kamal and those other diners in that restaurant. So my first dinner, I wasn't exactly sure how this was going to go, but it was an experiment. So all I knew was that I wanted the dinners to be in a community member's home. I only wanted 10 people because I wanted to make sure that these dinners were intimate and everyone had an opportunity to be seen and heard. I wanted international food. Now, we all know that food is a universal language, and in all of my work overseas, food was my way in to every community that I worked in, and it was not going to be different here. So a friend of mine agreed to have 8 strangers into her home that they did not know. I invited 8 people that I had recently met that I wanted to get to know better, and another friend connected me to a wonderful Vietnamese woman who made a fantastic Vietnamese meal. And guess what happened? Everybody talked and everybody ate. It was a really, really great experience. It was just like being at a regular dinner party, except we started as strangers, and by the end of that meal, we were strangers no more. Now, since that first dinner, I've held 10 dinners in different community members' homes in all our community's beautiful diversity. All of the chefs and home cooks have been people from different countries. Now, what happens at a dinner? Well, one of our most recent dinners we had at Asan and Reshma's house. And this dinner was an opportunity for people to ask sensitive questions. We talked about the difference between Islam and Christianity. We talked about race. We talked about the impact of politics on family relationships. It was an opportunity for people to ask sensitive questions without fear of being called racist or ignorant. It was an opportunity for people to share their perspectives without fear of judgment. When you create space among strangers for conversation, dialogue, and connection, those labels, the stereotypes, the preconceived ideas and assumptions that we often have about each other begin to disappear. We begin to see each other's individuality. We're no longer Muslim. We're no longer African American. We're no longer white folks. We are now Asan. We're Reshma. We're Kristen. We're Josh. We can sit around the table in all of our individuality and yet understand that we are all connected and inextricably linked by the human connection and by the power of humanity. It's difficult to hate someone when you're sharing a meal. Imagine if this was happening in every community, in every city, town, and village across the globe. We can move from hate and fear to love, compassion, and empathy. And we can sit in love and connection. Now, my challenge for you is very simple. Have a meal with a stranger. It's not that difficult. It's not rocket science. But you have to show up. You have to be intentional. You have to be brave and courageous. And most of all, you have to open your heart. If we all do this, we can change the world.